Hello everyone, good morning to all. Very good morning, all of you. It's a very pleasant morning. On behalf of Sri Ramakrishna Institute of Computer Education and Applied Sciences, I, Dr. Chami Patel, welcome you all at our 3-day workshop of ReactJs Day 2. I hope in the last session you all are clear with the basic concept of the React.js. Yesterday we'll discuss regarding the single page application, which is a very important topic for implementation of any application, web application with the Angular or a React.js. So today, today's session presenter is Miss Fatima Netiwala. She is right now working as a software development at Web Osmotic Software Solution. She is working in Angular JS over the period of time. So she is a very good expertise in that. Her other keen expertise in Angular 2 plus, React JS, React Native, Java, and D3. So we are very happy to call her for the sharing of her knowledge with you all guys. So without wasting your time, I directly hand over the session to Fatima. Fatima, please carry on.
Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to the day 2 of the workshop. I'm, s- um, we are going to talk about all things React.js. So yesterday, hopefully you got an idea about what is a single page application, and that was very important to know how a single page application works. So before we actually start with some React stuff and some history about it, some features about it, and lastly the project itself. I want to share you about my experience, how I got into this profession. So I was a pass out from MCA and I needed a training for my last semester. And I went to the WebOsmotic company for interview. And I actually, fun fact, actually interviewed for a Java position or a Java trainee. But the company itself was a really good training, had a really good training session. So I trained in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and itself core Java. And when I got a chance to choose a project, I got a chance between an Angular project and a Java project. And at that point of time, I got really interested in JavaScript. Mind you, before going into the training session, I really didn't know about JavaScript. I just knew HTML and CSS from what I learned throughout my college. I just knew basics of JavaScript and basics of Java. So as I learned in the company what is JavaScript and what is the front end part of the development side, I really got interested and I chose AngularJS and I'm so very happy about it. And over the time, once my AngularJS project got over, I got shifted to the React project. So as you know, many of you will be a new trainee or a new person to this kind of front end technology. So I want you all to know that it is possible to learn everything. I myself didn't know a thing about React.js, and the good thing about React.js is it has a small learning curve, and that means that you can learn it very easily. You just need a little focus and a little practice, and you will be able to start your own React.js application. So we'll start with the presentation. Let me share my screen with you guys. Can you see my screen? Ma'am, can you please confirm that we can see the screen?
Yeah, now it's visible, Fatima.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to the presentation. Let's start with it. First of all, before we start any new technologies, we need to know what is that particular technology. So React.js is a front-end library. It's an extension of a JavaScript. So JavaScript has many frameworks like Angular. Angular is more familiar and more famous. React is also very famous nowadays, and we have also Vue.js. So there are many frameworks that is an extension of the JavaScript. React.js, however, is depends on JavaScript more than Angular or Vue, because React.js is just, as we will see in the further presentation, React.js is more dependent on JavaScript because it uses more native JavaScript than any languages that I've experienced with. So React is a JavaScript library for building fast and interactive user interfaces for the web as well as mobile applications. You can develop mobile applications with React as well. So React is a JavaScript library and not a framework. So my first question is that, do you know what is the difference between a library and a framework? So let me tell you what it is. So it's a very thin line. Library and framework, it's almost similar, but frameworks have other dependencies in it when you start working in it. So for example, if you start working in Angular, whenever you create an Angular project, you will have a set of different packages or different libraries that will be installed with your Angular project that you will need to work with it. So for routing or something like that, there will be a packages that you will need to work. Uh, Unlike that, React is an itself it's a library which can be used independently. So there are many packages in React. So let me give you an example. If you want to perform routing in a React project, you will need a React router or something like that for a package. I'm sure you might. I know you might have heard about React Router or not, but React Router is a package that is an extension of the React project that provides a set of rules or set of functionalities to perform a routing on a React project. So you can choose to use that project, or you can choose not to use that package. React itself can work independently on its own, and that makes it a library more than a framework. As we all know, React was developed by Facebook and it is maintained by Facebook as well. And React is the main front end technology for Instagram as well. It's an open source library. So the main advantage, and do you know why this is so, the React has been so upcoming and so famous? One of the major reasons was that it's an open source library. That means people can introduce their own ideas, can open merge requests for the React, and can introduce their part of code into the React itself. It's an open source. Anyone can come, anyone can provide a merge request, and if the authorities of the React agrees to the change, you will be a developer of a React. So that's a really cool thing. So many of you will know what is the model view controller dynamic or an architecture. So React in this model view controller dynamic is the view part. So React handles everything what you see on the screen. So React will be the part where you see the pages, where you see the routing, where you see the buttons and everything. React handles all of that. So before starting with the React development, you need to understand some of the basic technologies or concepts or frameworks that you need to understand before starting the project. So let's see what are those. Before starting anything, one should be familiar with the programming concepts like functions, objects, arrays, and classes. So I'm sure many of you will learn all of these concepts in Java, functions, objects, arrays, and classes. Similar to all these concepts, we use these in React as well. We use classes. There are different types of classes in React. There are different types of functions. There are different types of arrays. So one should be familiar before starting the React development. Also, we need a good understanding for HTML and JavaScript. of course, because HTML is used to design the design the front end that you would like to see on the screen, and JavaScript because React is made on top of JavaScript. So you need to have a good understanding of how JavaScript works and how we need to code in JavaScript, and how the functions works in JavaScript. Also, to work with the React, we should have a very basic knowledge of Node.js and npm. You just need to know how to install the Node.js and how to work with npm, because you would need to install React and React frameworks and React packages via npm. So you would need to know a very basic amount of knowledge about Node.js and npm. So these are the things that I think you need to know before starting React.js development. So let's start with some features. So React has a ton of features that makes it what it is. So first of the feature is JSX. JSX is a combination of JavaScript and HTML. So I know it must be confusing at first listening to how can JavaScript and HTML be combined, but we will see in React that most of the development is done in JSX. So JSX is an extension of JavaScript. By using JSX, we can write HTML code that contains the JavaScript code as well. So we can combine both of them and make a JSX. Let me give you an example of how it looks. So consider this following statement. You can see this is var element ele. We can give any name to the variable, and this is the HTML part. So we are giving a variable ele the value as an HTML structure. So in this particular part you see is JavaScript, and this particular part you see is an HTML. So we are technically giving a JavaScript variable an HTML value. This gets combined and forms a JSX part. So you must be thinking why do we need to use JSX? What is the purpose when we have a separate JavaScript and HTML that's working really good? Why do we need JSX? So my answer to that is, one of the things that is very important is it is faster than normal JavaScript. Because so the reason why it's faster, because in regular JavaScript the HTML and the JavaScript is different, and both of them are translating differently. In this, the HTML and JavaScript is combined, so it perform optimization as we are translating JavaScript. So it draws the HTML on the screen along with the JavaScript computations that we might provide in the JSX. So for an example, we have h1 tag in HTML in JSX, and we have also added loops for each for loop as in JavaScript. So when we run the React project, the HTML gets painted along with the loop. So both of the things works simultaneously, and that makes it faster. With the JSX, it's very simple to create templates. Now templates are just a bunch of code into a file. So if you want to create a separate template for a login page, you can easily separate the login code with the other code. So you can create small templates with the JavaScript and HTML combined with the JSX, and can distribute your code very evenly and very clean, so that you don't have any overlapping of any code. So it's very easier to make templates as well. So instead of separating the markup and the logic in separated file, React uses components for this purpose. So in normal JavaScript or in normal HTML, we have seen that there's a different file for HTML and there's a different file for JavaScript. React totally discarded this purpose. So what React did was created a component, and what are components we are going to understand further in this presentation. But component is a combination of the JavaScript, JSX, and any other logic that you have for a particular page. So we can create a component for login page, we can create a component for sign up page, we can create a component for the main page. So what React does is have the HTML, have the JavaScript, have the logic all together in one single file, and that creates a really good separation of code in the project, and that makes it very easy to debug. So how can we use JavaScript expression in JSX? So as I shown you earlier in this particular example, that we are just using this variable and we are giving the HTML to the JavaScript variable. But what if you need to add a JavaScript variable inside an HTML? So maybe for an example, if you want to add a particular variable called ABC to this H1 inner HTML, how would you able to do that? So this is how you would do it. In React, we are allowed to use normal JavaScript expression with JSX. So any of the variable that you need to put into the HTML, we are using the curly braces for it. So anything that is between the curly braces will be considered as a JavaScript expression. So let's see an example of that. This is a very short snippet of the React code. So please ignore this import statement and React DOM render. We are going to cover it ahead. Just focus on this particular statement. So as you can see, we have variable I equals to 1. And then we are taking another variable constant element. And then we have an HTML H1 tag. So in between this curly braces, we are seeing that I is equals to 1. We are checking if whether the value of I is 1 when print hello world, or otherwise print false. So according to this particular snippet, the value of I is 1. So according to this particular syntax, hello world should be shown, and this will be the output of the program. So as you can see, we use the JavaScript conditional statement in the HTML with the help of JSX. Isn't that cool, guys? So we have also attributes in JSX. So in HTML elements, we have attributes. Like for an example, we have input tag, right? So input tag has attributes like type, we have name, we have ID. So in JSX also, we have HTML attributes, but that is solely a JSX attribute. So we use in HTML, we use class for an example. So we can't use that attribute. If we want to give a class to an HTML element in JSX, we cannot use the class keyword because the class keyword belongs to the JavaScript solely. That will create a problem because JSX will not understand that class it needs to be added as a class. So for that purpose, we added class name in JSX. Instead of using class, we are using class name. So we can have we have the inbuilt we can add the inbuilt attributes that are in the HTML with just a different name in JSX as well. We can also have custom attributes in JSX. So for an example, I want to add some attribute to an HTML element that I want to give the data according to my needs. So in JSX, we have a custom attribute functionality. For defining any custom attribute, we are just going to be prefixing that particular attribute with the data. For an example, as you can see here, I have added the constant element. This is an H1 tag and this is an H2 tag. But here you can see we have used class name is equals to hello. instead of using class, we are using class name, because in JSX, to give a class to an element, we have to use this particular keyword, not the class keyword as we use in HTML. And in H2, we are using data dash sample attribute. So this sample attribute is a custom attribute that we created for our development purposes. It is not registered in HTML. It is not registered in JSX. It is solely created for our development purposes so that we can get the data of that particular attribute from the element. So whenever you want to create a custom attribute in JSX, you need to prefix it with the data dash. So data dash sample attribute is equals to whatever you want to put it as a value, and you can get that value in the JavaScript as normal. So there are two ways in specifying attributes. Okay, so the first way is as string literals. So you can give a string value to an attribute as well, or you can give as an expression as well. So for an example, if we want to give class name based on a variable, so let's take an example that I have a page that I have a page that needs to be background needs to be changed according to some conditional operator. So I can't code directly into the HTML like with the string literal. I can't do that. So I need to give the class name a particular variable. So I can this var, as for an example, this is a var name. So I can give conditional expression to this var name variable, and I can give the class name this particular variable, and it will take the value as it changes. So if var name variable is gives the class name as black, the background will be black. If the var name variable name is white, the class name would be white, and according to your CSS that you have put in, the background will be white for that particular class. So we can either give a string literal, or we can give a expression as well, two attributes. So now we are going to talk about wrapping elements or children in JSX. So in React, one of the consideration that you have to keep, that it can only have one root div or one root element. So in the body of the React, you cannot have children of a root. You need to have a one parent or one superset div that other elements can be a children of. Okay, I'm going to show you that in the examples ahead, but I'm just telling you for your information right now that React can only have one root as a parent, one element as a root or a parent. You cannot have multiple elements as a parent. So consider a situation where you want to render multiple tags at a time. Okay, so you need to wrap all the tags under a parent tag and then render this parent tag to an HTML. So there will be a parent and there will be a number of child elements inside that parent, and the parent will be rendered onto the HTML. So all the subtags would be child of one parent element. As you can see in this example, this is a constant element. We are giving div to this element, and inside that one div we have three h tags, right? So we cannot have three h tag in an element, so we cannot have a children. We need to wrap these header tags into a one particular div. So this will be the parent, and these are the children of that. And we are giving this element to the render object or the render function, and this will be the output of that particular um, snippet of the code. This is the h1 tag, this is the h2 and h3, and these three lies in one particular route. That is the div element that I showed you here, right? So we are concluding with the JSX. This is the very, very basics of JSX that you need to start off your React project. So before we go ahead with some other features, I want to know if you have any questions regarding JSX or any question that I have that you have for me. So we are going to take a pause for a couple of minutes. You can comment your questions down below in YouTube and um, can tell me. Ma'am, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Fatima, is there any other extension like JSX, or
Yes.
it's the only one?
No, yeah, we have. So JSX is a combination of JavaScript and HTML, right? And React also works with TypeScript. TypeScript is another extension of JavaScript. JavaScript is the main one, and others are all extension of it. So we can have TSX as well in it. So JSX is a combination of JavaScript and HTML, and TSX is a combination of TypeScript and HTML. So we can either use JSX, we can either use TypeScript. We can also code the React project without JSX and TSX. We can use the JavaScript itself, but it will be harder for React project to make it a faster, reliable project without JSX or TSX. So to make the React project faster and more efficient with the performance, we are using the this extensions of VJSX or TSX. Any
Okay,
else
okay. Thank you
question?
so much. No, no other more. You
Okay,
can go ahead.
okay. So the next feature is the virtual DOM, and it is one of the most important things of most of the important parts of the React. So before we actually start considering the virtual DOM, we need to understand what is DOM. So DOM is a tree-like structure that contains all the elements and its properties of a website as its nodes. So HTML, as you know, is a collection of all the HTML tags, and when you let me give you an example of it. When you open a Facebook account, for an example, if you open a Facebook homepage and you see there are multiple there's a search box, there's a photo, there's an ad. So there are all different HTML tags, right? And that all particular tags are being rendered on a particular surface that you see on the screen. So that surface is called DOM, and DOM is a structure of all the elements and properties along with the CSS. So originally, what happened is developer directly manipulated the DOM elements, which resulted in very frequent DOM manipulation. So for an example, in a pure JavaScript website, if you need to change a particular element value or a particular element CSS or anything, you would need to actually get that particular DOM element in your JavaScript code and change the value of it and then again update it on the screen. So that becomes obviously if we are creating a website that will need to happen more frequently because we're gonna add forms, we are gonna add images, we are gonna add so many things to our website, and that will create a heavy DOM manipulation if we are just using pure JavaScript and pure HTML. So the browser, each time we make an update, the browser has to recalculate and repaint the entire view in a pure JavaScript environment. So whenever we change a value, browser needs to go through the entire page, needs to see what changed, needs to get that particular change, update it, and then repaint the entire page along with the CSS. That creates a really a long process, and that consumes a lot of time. As you can imagine, if this is just one example, if we have a website like Facebook or Instagram where constant updation is going on, as you can see, we're just commenting on a comment where thousands and lakhs of people are commenting on Facebook comments, and each time a comment appears, the DOM needs to re-render or it needs to get updated. So doing this in a pure JavaScript environment will be very time consuming. Also, the performance would not be good. So as you know, some of you may know that in pure JavaScript, we can modify the contents of DOM by using functions like get element by ID or get element by class. So what happens when you do this? Let's consider a case. Okay. So this is an example, document.get element by ID. We are giving some id dot inner value, and we are updating that value. Okay, so these are the steps that it needs to happen to get the updated value on the screen. So the first step will be the browser passes the HTML to find the node with this id. So it passes the entire screen and finds the HTML element with the id that you sent here. So it needs to go and search for it. Then it removes that particular element from the specific element. So for an example, this ID, inside that there are children of that particular element, right? So the browser needs to remove those children as well, because the parent value is changing. So it might happen is that the children value might change as well. So the browser needs to remove all the children of this particular element as well. Then it develops or updates the element with the updated value right here. It recalculates the CSS for the parent and the child nodes. So it has been removed, right? So it needs to put it back. So when the browser puts it back, it needs to recalculate the CSS of it as well. And then finally it updates the layout. With the naked eye, when we work on a pure JavaScript application, in naked eye we just see a split second, not even a second, it updates it, but it goes through so many steps internally. So once it updates the layout, it again travels or searches where it needs to put it, and then prints on the browser screen. So this is just for this whole section of steps is just to update a value. Imagine if you need to update so many values at the same time, the browser will hang. The browser will have a problem keeping up with all those manipulations at the same time. So, I'm not saying that it will not work. Of course, it will work, but it will be a less faster response. Okay, so to overcome this particular thing, React introduced virtual DOM. Okay, so React keeps a lightweight representation of the real DOM in the memory, and that is known as the virtual DOM. So there is a real DOM in which the data is. So what React does it? React keeps an exact copy of that particular real DOM in its memory, right? So anytime we make a change, anytime you make a change, the change does not go to the real DOM directly. It goes to the virtual DOM first. So for every object that exists in DOM, there will be a same object, exact same object in the virtual DOM. But the virtual DOM does not have the power to change the layout of the document. It's just a memory of the real DOM, right? Manipulating DOM is a slow process, but manipulating virtual DOM is fast, because virtual DOM does not have the responsibility to show that changes on the browser. It just need to record that changes in the virtual DOM, right? Does not have to draw anything on the screen. It just need to take a record of that particular change has happened. Now, once that particular change has happened, what happens is as you can see in this image, this is a tree-like structure, okay? So this is parent element and the child elements and stuff like that. So what happens is we make, for an example, we make a change to this particular element. Okay, so the virtual DOM keeps a track of the change, and that's change. So React uses a diffing process. It's called a diffing process, in which it checks whether there is a difference between the virtual DOM and the real DOM. As you can see, the React will recognize that there has been a change in the virtual DOM, and it will directly compare it with the real DOM element right here, and then would only change that particular element, not the whole thing, not the whole page or the all the elements. It will just replace the affected nodes only. So this saves a lot of time and a lot of performance, right? So to do this virtual DOM technique in React, we have to import a package called React DOM. React DOM is a package that provides DOM specific methods that can be used at the top level of a web app to enable the DOM management, right? So one of the major methods, the React DOM has multiple methods to manage the DOM, but the most used or the most popular method that you will see in every example across the internet is the render method right here. The render method is responsible for updating that DOM value or screen. To use the React DOM in a React app, we first need to import it. So if you have core Java or something, a core Java knowledge, or if you have seen any Java web apps, you would see you know that to use some resources, we need to import it. We need to get that resource into that file, and then we can use it. The same thing happens with React as well. To use any resource, we first need to import it, any resource, either if it's a constant or if it's another component or anything, any other packages, we first need to import that particular package or if file before using it. So to import the React DOM, we need to first write import React DOM from React DOM. This React DOM that you see in the quotes is the name of that particular package, right? So what is the render function? Render function is used to render a single React component or several components wrapped together in a component or a div element. So as I mentioned earlier, the in React, every element or a div element or a component is wrapped inside one parent div, right? So render function handles the update or updation and deletion or whatever we do on the screen, and handles the responsibility of showing that change on the screen. So it's render is a function, so it will have attributes as well, right? So as you can see in the previous example, we have imported the package of React DOM into this particular variable. This name can be anything you want. It can be a name as well, right? So we have right now given that name as a React DOM just for the clarification purpose, but it can be your name as well. So we are with the React DOM dot render. This is the method that we are using, and these three are the parameters of the particular render function. So let's see what each parameter stands for, right? So element is a parameter JSX expects a React element to be rendered. This particular the element parameter is the actual element that needs to be rendered or have been updated or have been deleted. That particular element needs to be passed on. The second parameter is in which area of the page. So you want the particular element to be rendered inside a div with class called ABC. So you need to pass that container in the second attribute as well. And the third is the optional parameter. You can pass it or you cannot pass it. It's an optional parameter that uh, it's a callback function. So what a callback function does is whenever a particular task has been made. So in this case, whenever the element is rendered, it will call this callback function right back. As soon as the render function shows the changes on the screen, this callback function will be called. And if you want to, for an example, if you want that once this value is updated, you need to call another function. So you can do that in this callback function. This parameter is optional. You can add it or you can skip it, but the element and the container is needed all the time. Let me give you an example that we previously had, right? So now you can understand more, right? What is this React DOM.render? Uh, So in React DOM.render, this is the element that needs to be rendered, right? The element variable that we added before. This needs to be rendered where it needs to be rendered. The second parameter, right? So document.getElement by ID root. Root is the parent element that houses all the other child elements. So document.getElement by ID root is the container in which this particular element needs to be rendered upon. So this is the element, this is the container. You can have the third optional callback if you want. So this has come to an end regarding DOM and the virtual DOM. If you have any questions, please let me know. We are going to take a couple of minutes for you to generate your questions. Ma'am, if there are any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, one question is there. You can see that. Okay, how can we access the value of child element when we have a single parent and multiple child?
When you have a single parent and multiple child. Oh,
Yeah.
so yeah.
So how can we access the value of child element?
So when you get a particular element, for an example, there is a parent node called root, as we have seen here, and there are multiple child elements in this. So when you get that particular element by ID root, when you would console, when you would print that particular element, I don't know if you guys know console.log. When console.log is a function where you can print any value in the console, right? So if you print that particular parent element in the console, you will see that all the child elements will be there in a JSON format. So you will have all the children elements inside that particular object. You can easily store the get element by ID root value in a variable, and then you can map through all the child elements inside it. It's all the child elements will be present in that variable. So you can either loop through it, or you can also directly get the child element by their class name or their ID as well. So inside the root, if we have two child elements, one we can give an ID to both of them, and we can directly access those child element as well. Or if you don't know how many child elements are there inside a root element, you can just get the root, store it into a variable, and then loop through it. I hope this answered your question. Any other questions, ma'am? Hello. Okay, so we are going forward. We are going forward with one of the main features of the React are called components, right? So components is one of the core building blocks of React. Component is nothing but a file in which there are HTML and CSS or JSX, we can say, housed with some logic inside it. So for an example, if you want to create a login page, we would create a separate file in which all the JSX, all the logic you need for that particular login page is housed in that particular file, and that particular file is known as component. In React, the application is done via components. It is advised to have different components for different functionalities. We can also say that every application that you will develop in React will have pieces of code which are called components. Let's see what I mean is this. So as you can see on the screen, this is an Instagram page. Everyone everyone will be aware of what the Instagram web page would look like. On the first glance, we just see that it's a web page of a particular of an account. But can you imagine how many components are installed around this particular page, which is developed on React, right? So as you can see in this, there are so many components. The first components we see is search component. We have the profile description component. We have stories component. We have post list component. And in this, we have single post component. This means that by using components, we can increase the reusability of a particular project. So if we create a search box and create a separate component of it, like a separate file for it, we can reuse it all over the application. We do not need to code it in every page, right? So this enables the reusability of the code to a very high level. Similarly, the profile description component, the stories component, post list component, and the single post component. Why do we create? So my question is, we have a post list component, right? Why would we need to create a single post component as well? To reduce the code, because in this post list component, we can just reuse the single post component in a loop, and that will just render the single post. We would not have to code it every time. So we can have very small components, or you can have large components according to your needs, right? There are mainly two types of components. One is the functional component. So functional components are simply JavaScript functions. Okay, so functional components are just functions which return an HTML. We are gonna see in detail the functional components and the class components in the next set of session on Monday. We are just gonna go through basics of how the components look and how many types are there. So the first major types is the functional component. It's just a JavaScript function which returns some HTML. We cannot pass any data to it. We cannot interact with any other component with it. It's just a function that returns an HTML code. The second type of components is class components. So class components are a little more complex than the functional components, because class components have the ability to communicate with other components as well. And it also returns HTML, mind you. It also returns HTML. It does all the things that functional component does, but class component does more actions than the functional components. Class components can get contact with the other components as well. They can pass data via props. We are going to go through what are state and props in the next set of slides as well. So class components are used whenever we need to communicate with other files or other components. And functional components are used when we do not need to communicate or send data from one to another. we just need to return an HTML. So these are the two major types of components. We are gonna go through the in-depth of the components in the next session. So this concludes the components part of the presentation. If you have any questions, please drop in the YouTube section. Ma'am, do we have any questions for the components?
I think it's clear with all, so we didn't get any question
Okay,
regarding because it's very
okay,
good explanations. You
thank you.
can move on.
Okay. Please, students, if any of you have question regarding the topics that we have already covered, please feel free to drop in for them. Drop in the questions for them as well. If you have any, we're going to answer at the end of the session. So the next feature is the straight and props. So in JavaScript, in a pure JavaScript web app, you know there are variables, right? So we with the use of variables and the functions that we use, we can
Hello, hello, Fatima. Students wait for a while. I think some network issues are there, so we'll
Yeah.
wait for her.
Yes, yes. Please wait, everyone. I'm posting you the question here, question link. So you can answer those questions. Hello everyone. Uh, See, the feedback is compulsory. At the end of the session, we are providing you the link for feedback. So it is a compulsory to provide it. Then you are considered for the certification of this workshop. So please everyone, provide the feedback. We will share at the end of the session before 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry for the delay. Sorry for the disruption. My internet connection seemed to have its own mind on its own. So I think we were here. So I'm gonna just repeat some of the things that I said below. I don't know where we stopped, so I'm gonna repeat this particular section again. So as I said earlier, the states are part acts as a variable of a particular component. This is how you add a component or a class component to your React project. This is the constructor of the class. As we know, in Java we have constructor. If whenever a class gets executed, this particular constructor will run. So this dot state is equals to attribute colon value. This is how you need to initialize the value of a state for a particular component. And the super props function is used to initialize the parent component state. So if there is a case that the parent class passes any value to the child class, the super props initialize the parent class states so that the value in the child component can be passed through. So now, in a pure JavaScript environment, we can update the variables very easily. So we to initialize a variable in a pure JavaScript environment, we are just using variable name equals to some value, and if you want to update that value, we're just using that name is equals to the updated value. But in React, to update a value of a state, it is not recommended to update that particular value directly. Why? Because React uses state as an observable object. Okay, so what does that observable object mean? Observable object is nothing but that React uses that state object to understand or observe that what changes are made to a state and what changes it needs to be added to that particular UI or a web page. So if any state variables are used in the UI part of the component, and if the state value changes, React sees that, observes that changes, and changes accordingly. It changes the virtual DOM, and the virtual DOM with the diffing process sees that it has been changed, and the change gets added to the real DOM. So it's a whole chain of steps that needs to be followed. And if you change the value of a state directly, then React will not be able to understand what change has occurred and will not be able to see what change, not be able to understand what change has occurred, and will not be able to depict that on the UI. So to update a particular state value, we need to do the following. This dot state dot attribute equals to new value. So in the previous example, we see that this dot state, we have initialized this dot state as an object, and inside that object we have attribute value. So to update that attribute value, we need to access that like this dot state dot attribute, and then we can give the new value, right? So this particular thing is called the direct change. That should not happen. Okay. If you change a particular state value using this method, this dot state dot attribute equals to new value, the your value will be updated in the object, but the React DOM would not be able to understand that change. To overcome that, we are using the set state method. So React provides a specific method for this task. It's called a set state method. Set state method takes a parameter, which is an object, and in an object, the value of the attributes of the state is expected. So for an example, if you want to change the value of the attribute by a set state method, we need to do this dot set state, and inside that, the first parameter that is expect is an object, and the object is attribute and the new value. So this by doing this by running this particular set state method, what it does that it goes into the state, it changes the value of the attribute to the updated value, right? This is the correct way of adding or updating state value, because and by using this value, the React DOM will get to know that it has changed and it will be reflected on the screen. With this particular method, the React DOM will not be able to detect the change, and the UI will not get affected. By this method, it will. There is also an optional second parameter of the set state method. It's a callback function. So for an example, if you need to do any function or any logic after the set state method has been called, after the attribute value has updated, you can pass a second parameter of a callback, in which it's a function. So once the attribute value is updated, the callback function will be called, and you can do some of your logic there if you want. It's an optional, but for the set state, this first parameter as an object is a must. Okay. So the only time we are allowed to define this state explicitly is in the constructor, as we have seen earlier, right here. We are initializing the state value. We are initializing the state value in the constructor. The only time you can do it. You cannot do it afterwards. You cannot do it in the middle of a function or in middle of a render function. The only time that you can initialize it is in the constructor. So that the state can prevail throughout the lifetime of a component. State updates are also independent. So what does that mean? The state object of a component may contain multiple attributes, right? So it can have multiple values inside a state. So set state function. So we'll take an example. This dot state equals to dark theme false and search term 2. So we are here initializing two values inside a state object at the constructor initialization time. So in the set state method, we can also update multiple values of a state together. So in this example, as we have seen, we are just adding this one value to get updated. We can also add another value inside this object by just adding a comma and then the new value and the updated value, right? We can update multiple value in the set state method, or we can have multiple set state method for one for individual state value. It doesn't matter. If you have multiple set state method for each variable or each state, the React ultimately combines it itself in the background and then updates all the states all in one go. So if you use multiple set state method, or if you use one set state method for multiple state values, it works just the same. So we can say that the state updates are independent of how you update it. It will altogether update it in one go. So this concludes the part of this state, where state in React, which also acts as a variable. So another one of the main things we have are props. So what are props? For let's take an example. We are logging into a website, right? So once you log in, once you log in, you need to pass the logged in user information to the home page, because you need to have a communication to make the two components work together, right? So React allows to pass information to a component using something called props. Props are just a short form of called properties. We can pass props to any component as we declare attributes for any HTML tag. So this is the demo component. Demo component is a component we are adding it for an example, and this is the prop that we are passing to that particular component. So in the above code, we are seeing that we are passing a prop named sample prop with the value of hello prop. Let me show you an example in further states. So now, to access the props in the component in which it has been passed, so for an example, we are passing the logged in user name from login component to a home page component. So how can we access that passed value? To access that passed value, we have this dot props dot prop name. So this dot props, similar to the this dot state, is the parent object in which the other values reside. So to access the prop value, we are using this dot props dot prop name. The this dot props is a kind, as I said, is a kind of a global object which stored all the components prop. So here we have a code snippet, as you can see. So first of all, I'm gonna start with the top and go down the bottom. First of all, we need to import React and React DOM. So we are importing React from React and then importing React DOM from React DOM as well. And we are doing a class component of a parent. So this is the first parent component. We are descripting it like this: class parent extend react.component. React.component comes from this particular package. And then the render function. The render function, as you can see, you have an h2, and then it has a child component. This is a component with the value name and user ID passing through it. This is the child component. It's similar to what the parent component is. And look at how it accesses the props value. This dot props dot name, this dot props dot user ID. This is the name that we have passed from the parent element. So this is how we are communicating from the parent to the child, right? These are called essentially the value that are passed from one component to another component are called props, and we can use it accordingly, like here. So this will be the output of it, and this is the h2 of the parent component, and then the user, and this is the child component that with the value passed from the parent. Now, one more important thing is you cannot change the value of props in a child component. The child component cannot ever change the value of a prop. The prop value is just for read-only purposes. Props are essentially state of a parent component, right? So this dot props dot name, this name is a state of the parent component. So in this example, the parent component has just passed directly the value, but if the parent component had set a state for that name and user ID, this props will be the state of this parent component. So you cannot change the props value in a child component. You can only change the value of a state. The props are immutable or only read only. That is a very important thing to keep in mind. Right. So this concludes the part of the state and props. Do you guys have any questions, or do you want me to repeat anything? Please let me know in the comment section below.
Okay, Fatima, one question that state is compulsorily to initialize in constructor only. First, we have to initialize it in constructor only, or is there any other in also?
No, it is recommended. It is recommended that you initialize the state value in the constructor, because constructor is the first function that is executed when a class is rendered on a UI. So as I said earlier, state needs to be present throughout the whole life cycle of a component. So to maintain that statement, we need to initialize that in the constructor. It is advisable, it is recommended to have the state variables inside the constructor so that it is available throughout the life cycle of that component.
Okay, okay, thank you. And one more is there for props. Okay, props
Yeah.
is the only one to pass the information to components.
Yes, props is the only way that you can pass information from one component to another. You cannot use the state value of a parent component inside a child component without passing it. You cannot have a direct access to a parent state inside a child. If you want to have a communication between the two, you need to pass it via props.
Okay.
Okay.
One more question with the student that what is the use of super prop?
Okay, yeah. So as I said earlier in this, let me get that slide. Yeah. So super props is that in a child component, if there is a value that has been passed from the parent, right? For an example, a parent component has passed some values to a child component, so we need to make sure that the parent state or a parent states are also initialized, or props have been initialized. To make sure we need to add the super props does nothing, is it travels back to the hierarchy. So it travels upwards, the parent component, and if that parent component has anything parent grandparent component have, it initialize all these states and props of the parent components of that particular component. It is necessary because every state or every props needs to be initialized so that the communication channel is activated.
Okay, thank you, Fatima. You, go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that I forgot to mention is that um, props is props can be anything. So right now I've just given an example of strings passing from one component to another, but props can be an object, props can be an array, props can be a function as well. So for an example, a parent component have a function called ABC, which needs to be executed on a button click of a child component. So as I said earlier, you cannot access any state or any function of a parent from a child without passing through it. So we can also pass functions in the props to a child component as well. So it can be a string, it can be an array, it can be an object, or it can be a function as well. So let's start with the following topic: unidirectional data flow in React. So as I said earlier, you cannot access a parent value in a child value without passing it. So why does this happen? Because React has a unidirectional data flow. Unidirectional is one flow. Unidirectional itself means flow in one direction. It cannot flow in two sides or two ways. So let me give you an example, a real life example for AngularJS. So AngularJS is very popular for its two-way binding. So two-way binding is that we can change the value of anywhere inside the file, and it will change it everywhere because it listens to the change and it changes everywhere. But in React, we are following a hierarchical view. Everything is hierarchical. As I have said earlier, render has a parent component. It cannot have multiple parents. It can have just one parent. The DOM tree is also hierarchical. The components is also hierarchical. So everything has to be accumulated to a single parent. So data flows from parent to child. The data cannot flow from the child to a parent, right? Data coming from a parent is called props. Angular uses bidirectional binding, which allows the user to flow the data in both the direction. But React doesn't support bidirectional binding. It just follows one-way clean flow architecture. So because of this reason, we cannot access the parent state in a child component, or we cannot even change the parent state inside a child component. We can only change the state value inside the component where it has been initialized, because the state access is defined to a particular class. We can communicate or we can pass the state value via props, but props make the state go immutable. We cannot change the props. Hence, the flow becomes parent to children and not children to parent. The major benefit of having this kind of architecture or a unidirectional flow is that you have ultimately a better control over it. So state is, as I said earlier, state is always owned by a component. Any changes made by this state can only affect the component below it. So for an example, we have a hierarchical view. We have a login component, we have a homepage component, and inside that homepage component, we have a table component. So anything that changes in the homepage component will affect the table component which resides in it. It will not affect the login component, which is a parent component. It does not affect the parent component. It only affects itself and the child component. Any changes that has been made inside a component affects its child components and not its parent component, because React uses a unidirectional flow from parent to children. I hope I have cleared this particular unidirectional data flow in React, because it is quite important, and you have to make sure that this particular flow does not get affected while you are developing. Okay, so the next topic we have is a life cycle of ReactJS. So I've said earlier in many occurrences that state should prevail, the component life cycle. Life cycle is this and that, and so this is the time we understand the life cycle. So anything that comes into the UI has a life cycle, right? So every component inside the React goes through three main phases: mounting, updating, and unmounting. So mounting, before we go any further, let me give a scenario. Mounting is something like when the component is getting available to the screen. Updating is when a component has a value change. So whenever a value is changed inside a component, it goes through the updating stage of a life cycle. And when you traverse from one page to another, so for an example, if you go from login to homepage, the login page or the login component goes through the unmounting page. When it leaves the UI, it goes to the unmounting page. So let's see what each phases has in store for us. So mounting, as I said, mounting is a phase where elements are put into the DOM. So React has four built-in methods that are called within the order that I have showed here. It gets called in this particular order when a component is getting mounted or getting added to a DOM. So the first method that it's called is constructor. As I said, constructor is the method which is called before anything else. So it is a natural place to set up the initial state, because after the constructor has been called, there can be multiple functionalities that goes through in the component, which may or may not provide state for you. So initializing the state in the constructor is beneficial, so that in the ahead life cycle time of that particular component, you will get the access of that state in throughout the life cycle of that component. So in this constructor phase, you can initialize the parent state and props, and also you can define the state value of that particular component as well. The next step we have is get derived state from props. Get derived state from props is called right before the elements are appearing in the DOM. So right before we can see the elements, this particular function is called. This particular function is the natural place to set the state object based on the initial props. So for an example, if we are passing some data from a parent to a child component, and if we want to save the prop value inside a state value, we can do that right here. So as you can see in this as you can see here in the constructor section, we have seen that this dot state favorite color, we have set it to red. Now, if we are passing some data from the parent to a child component, and if we want to set the favorite color according to the props that have been passed, so that can be done with the get derived state from props. So we have get derived state from props have two parameters, props and state, and it returns state as an argument in from the function. So we can just return the state, because we just have one value in the state right now. So we can directly return favorite color with the props dot favcall. Favcall is the variable name which is for the props that has been set up from the parent to the child. So we can change the value of the state according to the props in this particular stage of the life cycle. The next state is the render method. We discussed the render method ahead in the presentation, that it is responsible what you see on the screen. So render method is the actual HTML that you will see on the screen. And the last function that happens in the mounting phase is the component did mount. So the component did mount method is called whenever the HTML is set up or rendered on the DOM. Once the HTML has been rendered, this particular component did mount will get called. So in this example, what we have done is we have created a state with the favorite color red, and then once the render function has rendered this particular state value, the component did mount will call, and component did mount have a logic that after 1000 milliseconds, the state value should get updated to yellow. So the component did mount is called after the HTML has been rendered on the DOM. Whatever you want to do in after this UI elements are rendered, you can do into the component did mount section, right? So the next phase of the life cycle is updating. So a component is updated whenever there is a change in the component state or component props. So whenever a state is changed, and if that state has been passed as a prop to a child component, the child component will get affected as well naturally. So whenever a state or prop has been changed, the component itself goes into the updating phase of the life cycle. The updating phase have 5 built-in functions. Uh, the first is get derived state from props. As I mentioned earlier, get derived state from props is the function where you can change the value of the state according to props or anything like that, and it returns the state object as a return value of the function. The second that we have is should component update. Now this particular function defines whether a particular component should be re-rendered or not. It returns a Boolean value like true or false. So, for an example, if I want, if on a button click, I do not want to change that particular value on a UI, I can use this should component update function to return false as a Boolean value, and that would not re-render or stop the re-rendering process of the component. By default, this is optional. We can use this lifecycle method, or we can skip it. By default, it always returns true. The render function is, of course, the render function is the function that is responsible for the page that you see on the screen. The fourth function we have is get snapshot for update. This particular function is used to get the value of the previous props or previous states before updating. So whenever a state or props is updated, we can use this function to get the value before it gets updated. So get the previous value before the state or props get updated in that particular component. The final step in the updating phase, we have component did update. So exactly the same like component did mount. Component did update will be called once the UI has been re-rendered, or the state or props has been updated. So this concludes the updating section of the updating phase, should I say, of the life cycle. And the last phase of the life cycle is unmounting. Unmounting is whenever a component is removed from the DOM or unmount from the DOM, the unmounting phase gets triggered. So unmounting state just have one function inside of it, component will unmount. Component will unmount will be called just before the UI or the component gets removed from the DOM. So this, for an example, if you want to clear some garbage collection, if you want to perform some logic, or you want to perform some show some alerts, or show some messages before the UI gets removed from the DOM, this is the guide that you want to use. Component will unmount will be called just before the UI gets removed from the DOM. So these three are the main phases. We can say that the component goes through. Every component goes through these three phases in the life cycle. Okay, so now we have thankfully come to an end of the theoretical part of the presentation. Now we're coming to the fun part. Now we are going to see how to create a React app. Now, please make sure that there are tons of other things that we still need to understand about React and what React offers. But we are just giving you a preview of how you can create a React app. So maybe if you want to create a React app of your own, you can do it in the weekend, and then on Monday, if you have any questions for me, we can have a chat for that accordingly. I'm gonna show this again on Monday, but just for your knowledge, I'm just showing it right now as well. So how to create a React app actually, practically? Okay, so these are the steps that we need to create a React app. Firstly, we need to make sure that Node is installed in your computer, right? Node, you can install Node via using this link. You can just Google Node.js in your Google, and the first link that pops up is this nodejs.org, and you can follow the steps on that website and install Node easily. Then once the node is installed in your computer, you need to install a package called create React app. So now, please be mind that creating a React app does not necessarily need this package, but I find that this package really helps me to generate a basic template or a basic structure of a node of a React app easily. So I use this package, Create React App, to start my React project. So to install this Create React App, we are using npm install Create React App -g. Now it will install this Create React App package globally in your computer. This command, you need to add it to the terminal or a command prompt in command prompt of your computer. Now to create the actual project, you need to go to the folder in your command prompt, or if you're using Mac, you need to open your terminal. You need to traverse to the folder that you need to save your project in, and then you need to write npm create create React app, and then app name. So the whatever app name that you pass here will be the name of your project, and this will be shown in your terminal. So I have created here create React app test. This will create a React project called test inside my this folder, and it will also add the packages that it thinks you might need. So it will automatically add React, it will automatically add React script, it will automatically add React DOM. So you have a basic structure, and you will be ready to go once this particular creation is done. So I find create React app package very helpful for the React development to start. So let's see how that project it looks like in an IDE. All right, let me share you that screen with you first. Okay, so I'm using WebStorm to create for an IDE. For a React project, you can use anything that you want. You might be biased towards Visual Studio Code. I am biased towards WebStorm. So as I showed you earlier, I created a test project using Create React App. So I'm going to open that particular project right here. So, right. This is let me show you from the start. This is the project structure that you will get once the create React app command gets executed, right? It will, in the source folder, you will have an app component. You will have the main file index, which is executed first, and you will have some service workers and setup. These are all the inbuilt React files that you need for a React app to work. So let's start with the index.js first. I'm going to open that. As you can see, I've imported React DOM because I need it. And then I've also imported app because I need to call this component inside this index.js. So React DOM.render, and I've called this app component as well. This app.js holds the JSX I should say JSX of this particular page. This is how it will look. It will look on the IDE. Well, let me. This is the CSS part. This is the JS. I know you also need to import CSS for that particular component, whichever component you're working in. You need to import CSS as well, so that React knows which CSS it needs to take in account of. Any SVGs or any images that you might want to add, you need to import it beforehand, before the function. Right, so this is a perfect example of a functional component. As you can see right here, this is a functional component. We are not passing any data. We're not passing, we're not communicating with any other component. We are just taking this logo SVG and we are just putting it onto the UI. This is a prime example of a functional component. Now, how to run that particular this particular project? So in your terminal section, you can just write npm and then start. It would take a couple of, it can take a minute or a couple of minutes. So let that do its own work. In the meantime, I'm going to show you what this package.json file is, right? This package.json file is the file where you will see all your dependencies that are available in your project. So node or npm is responsible for adding your dependencies to your React project. So this package.json, as you can see right here in the dependencies section, I can see that all of these particular dependencies are added with the version number in my project. So I can see what are the dependencies that I have in my project. How can I run the project? So I started, to run the project, I did npm start, right? So what it does, I don't want to go in so deep with this, but I just want to show you how it actually runs your project. So whenever I enter the command npm start, it goes to this package.json file. It sees in the script and then see that the start value has actually the React script starts, and it actually runs this particular command, and the React takes, and then the React takes over and then do all of these things to actually run the project. So now I think our project has been started, and this is the first, or the very basic template that you will have once you create a project with the Create React app, right? And then you can change anything. So I'm going to change something. I'm going to add a couple of exclamation because it's exciting, right? You have to learn React. So I'm going to change that and then save it by Control S. And as you will see here, it will auto detect the change and will change the UI accordingly.
Hello, Fatima.
Hello.
Sorry to
Yes,
interrupt you. Uh,
yes.
Please big your font size. It's not
Oh, okay,
clearly
okay,
visible in your code.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Is it visible now?
Yeah. Now it's clear to visible.
Okay. So as I said, I changed something right here. Okay, learn React. Add. So exciting. And then I'm gonna save it. And it's gonna be added right here. So React sees what is changed into the UI and changes accordingly. As we said, the virtual DOM and the React, all those steps gets executed. Right. So this was one of the starter templates that we have, that we can use to jumpstart our React development. I'm going to show you another another project which I created called the calculator app. Okay, right. So this and this you will see a longer or a bigger section of components that I have. So the structure of the React project can be anything that you want. You can choose how you separate your files. You can choose how your project structure would look like. It is simply based on the developer's preference. Now, I have in this project, the logic part has been separated by this particular folder, and the component section has been separated by this particular folder. You can also go ahead and separate the different components with each folder. So you can have the app.js and app.css file into a folder called app, and it will be one more differentiation, right? So this is the, let us start with the index.js. As you can see, we have imported React DOM, we have imported index.css as well, and then we have imported app. Now this particular app component gets added to the get element by ID root. So this is the main parent, and the app is the start point of the application. App component is the start point of the application. Okay, so this is a classic example of a class component. So previously we saw example of a functional component. This is a class component, right? In this, I have a child component called display and a button panel. Let me start off this project so that you can understand more easily. Okay, let it do its own thing. So as I showed you earlier, as I told you earlier, we can pass functions as well as props, right? So let me show you. This is the button panel component, and inside this I have added a prop in which I have passed this function, handle click function that I showed you right here, right? So in the button panel component, whenever I want okay, so one more thing that I need to tell you before we go any further is this prop types. You will see in many of the examples of the React project, static prop types equals to whatever props that you pass. So prop types is nothing but an object where you need to specify what types of props you are expecting in this particular component. So in this button panel, we are just expecting a click handler, a prop called click handler, which type would be a function. This is helpful. Why? Because this creates less confusion, or the chances of errors are less if we generate a prop types. So if we generate a prop types click handler prop types function, if I do not pass this particular prop, the React would give me error, and I would know that this particular component expects a click handler prop with a type of function, and I have not passed it. So it creates lesser chances of errors, and it is a good debugging or a good development practice, right? So inside the button panel component, I have also created single button components as well, right? So in this particular class component, I am expecting name prop with a type of string, orange prop with a type of bool, wide prop with a type of bool, and a click handler prop with a type of function. If any of this prop type is not available for the button component, it will throw an error, right? So now to use this particular click handler, we are just using this dot handle click. This is the local function, And in that local function, we are calling this dot props dot click handler, which is the name of the prop, and inside the parameter that we need to pass through. So this particular thing would go to the app.js and then would do this particular thing. As I said earlier, we cannot change the value of a state of another component inside different component, and hence to change the state value of the state value in this component, we are passing this handler click handler function, and from here we are calling this function, and it will pass through, and it will come here, and then this dot state will happen, right? Let me show you how it looks like. So this is the calculator. I've just created a normal calculator function. You can also find this in any examples. Just Google it and you will find it as well. So I'm just adding something, and if I do this, it's 134. This it's a simple basic calculator for addition and multiplication and division purposes. The main thing I wanted to show you was the structure of how the hierarchical structure that the React app follows. So as you can see, app is the main thing, and app has different children. So it can have multiple children, but the main component is the app, which gets added to the root element here, right here. Right. I have some logic files also in this particular logic folder. It is basic JavaScript. It's based on your preference, on your requirements, what you need to add your files to. I just wanted to show you how the class component would look like and how the functional component would look like, how to pass your props from one function, one component to another. We have different prop types as well, and we have also state as well, right? So we have seen that, and this concludes our presentation for today. I hope you got to know a lot more about React and how React works generally. And on Monday, we are going to go through some of the other features of the React, which are a little more advanced and a little more helpful for you. Thank you.
Hello, it's Fatima.
Hi.
Thank you
Hi.
so much. And it's a really very interesting session today.
Thank you.
There are few questions
Yeah.
from the student side.
Yeah.
So let's take one. Any
Yeah.
recommended site or course we learn the ReactJs
Mm-hmm.
for the fresher? Any recommended
Yes.
site?
Yes, I have a couple of sites. So you can use Geeks for Geeks. It's You can just Google it, Geeks for Geeks. It has a wide range of examples, and also it's a very detailed explanation of also. I actually used that particular site reference for my presentation as well. So it's a really good site, and also you have W3 Schools. It's a very popular website. W3 Schools is great, and it defines all the basic things that you need to know for React. Also, react.js.org, the official site of the React, has many examples and many explanation as well. So you can go through any of these three.
Okay, thank you for answer. Second is, as React is front end, then which
Mm-hmm.
backend language we use with React?
Any one you want. It is free to use any, because React is only handles only a view in the model view controller architecture. As I said earlier, React only handles the view part, right? So you can use any backend, any sort of backend functionality. So the most popular is MERN developer. I think you guys might have heard about it. MERN is MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. So you can use MongoDB, you can use Firebase, you can use Java as well, because you can use any sort of backend technologies with React.
Okay, I hope that students got that answers. Now, the other answer from the feedback form, the student are demanding that the
Uh-huh.
question we had asked in feedback form. So please
Mm-hmm.
answer those questions too. So first
Okay.
question we had asked is, what happened if we
Mm-hmm.
update the state without using the set state method?
Yeah. So when you update a state method directly, without the set state, the render method would not be able to actually identify what changes are made, and that change would not be available to you on the screen. So that screen will not be updated. With the set state method, it by using set state method, it actually initializes a chain of functions or chain of actions, which helps the render function observes or identify the change that has been made, and that will reflect onto the UI.
Okay, and the second question we asked is, can we stop the re-rendering of the component by using method should component update of the life cycle?
Yes, you can do that. Should component update is made for that purpose only. So it returns a Boolean value. It always returns a true or false value. So based on your conditions, if you have any, if you need to stop the re-rendering process on any condition, you just need to add those conditions inside that function and then return false, and it will stop the re-rendering process.
Okay, and another question from the student,
Mm-hmm.
can we
Mm-hmm.
use Bootstrap with React?
Yeah, Bootstrap is actually, you can technically use Bootstrap in React. You cannot directly use Bootstrap, but we have a variation of Bootstrap for React separately. So if you go through the Google and say Bootstrap like design framework for React, you will have a list of design frameworks that you can use in React.
Okay, and the another question, if
Mm-hmm.
I use Node.js as a backend,
Yeah.
then what
Yeah.
is integration process?
Unfortunately, the integration process is quite long, and you would need to. I would need a lot of time to make you understand the Node and the React process. And personally, I do not work on Node, so I'm not a perfect person to answer that question.
Okay, so fine. I hope, student, today you had got a very good knowledge from our resource person Fatima Nevdiwala, and on behalf of Ramakrishna Institute, I like to thank you all for attending this session. There is one more question.
Yeah,
Right
sure.
now it is posted. Which
Mm-hmm.
one is better between AngularJS and ReactJS?
It is the most popular question among all of us. I am actually most confused about it as well. So, Angular and React both have their own places in the industry. So many of you will find React positive and React negative persons, and you will find also Angular positive and Angular negative person. What I think personally is that you need to see what are your requirements for your project, and what are your future development goals of that particular project. If your goals and your requirements are aligned to what React offers, you should go towards the React. And if your goals and your requirements align to what Angular offers, you should go towards the React. Personally, I do not I work with both of them, and I enjoy both of them. There are my colleagues who prefers React just because it offers a more pure JavaScript environment, rather than Angular. So it totally based on your preferences, but from the industry standard, right now React is more popular. So if you want to have a career in React, right now the place that for a React developer we have in industry is very good. So if you want to go for a React development, I think it will be better because the industry is is far through more acceptable for a React developer. Angular is just as popular and is just as good as React, but right now the industry trend is leaning towards a React a bit more. So I am based on the jobs and everything that we have, I think React would be a better option. But I do not say that Angular is not a good option because I enjoy both of them.
Okay, okay. Thanks a lot, and I hope the student is got their satisfied answer today.
Me
And
too.
yeah, then we will meet on Monday at 10.
Yes, yes.
Till then, all the students take care, and we are ending session here. Thank you, everyone, faculties and students, everyone to attend this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
One more
Bye.
thing, one more thing.
Yeah.
Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. Students, for the students, today you learn the basic things how to start with the React. So there is no need to for the further installation or special installation for the React startup. So you can do one thing in this 2 days. Okay, go with this basic things what you are done and taught today. And if you have any query regarding it and you want to do something new in that, then you may ask the question relevant to it to ma'am in the Monday session. So
Yep.
it's better for you also.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Fatima. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So
Bye.
we all will meet on Monday. Okay. Bye
Yes.
bye.
Bye.